Strength training for cyclists. We're talking legs, the big three. These are my top three choices for cycling specific leg exercises. And spoiler alert, they are not the squat, the deadlift, or the leg presses. All right, we're going to get right to a quick view demo of the big three: the step up, the single leg sit squat, and the bike squat. I have been a personal trainer for over 30 years, so I've gained lots of experience working with all different types of people, including cyclists, and years of knowledge through research, workshops, and certifications. On top of that, in making decisions on what exercise I choose, I'm going to apply flexible logic. I'm going to do what makes sense. General disclaimer: every exercise has a risk-reward ratio. There are no bad exercises. There's just a risk and reward based on each individual. So if you attempt any of these motions and they hurt when you do it, don't do it. Or at the very least, make some modifications. And when choosing any exercise or movement, you need to make sure you have adequate movement capability for the exercise both to be safe and effective. If you're not sure, hire a professional to observe and give feedback, or DIY it and take a video of yourself and then compare it to the demonstrations in this video. All right, let's get into the details of the big three exercises. We want to optimize our training movements so that we can minimize our gym time. Most cyclists have a tenuous relationship with strength training. We all believe we should do it, and we have ambitious intentions. But if we need to cut something, usually the strength session is the first to go. In the off season, we start with 3 days a week, really going after it, but then our ride volume starts to go up, our training stress balance starts to go negative, and we cut it down to 2. Then the intensity starts going up, and oh man, I want to have fresh legs for those intervals, and we cut it down to 1. Then the race season starts, and we maybe do 1 or 2 a month, or we just stop completely. So if strength training is so effective, why is it so easy to cut? Every coach and sports scientist tells you that strength training should be done for injury prevention. But let's face it, when things are going well and we don't have any injuries, we're willing to gamble a little bit. It's also very hard to quantify. Does strength training improve performance? You can go down that rabbit hole of research, and I can guarantee you, if you pull up all the studies, it's probably 50-50. Some say it does, some say it doesn't. You have all those variables: sample size, fitness base of the people in the study, how long the study was done, what the exercises were, what the prescription was, individual differences. It goes on and on and on, and you never get any firm answers. And if you look at current training science as it pertains to riding on the bike, we've gone full circle and gone back to the Merckx days. It's all about miles in the legs, doing high volume weeks, long duration rides at low intensity. So if we're faced with doing an hour or hour and a half in the gym versus going out for a 2-hour ride and making our 10-hour week into a 12-hour week, we're probably going to pick the ride. And let's face it, we love to ride our bikes. If we have the option of a fun group ride with friends or going to the gym and spending time with the bros, we're probably going to go with the group ride. If we're talking strength in just general terms of strength, it's a full-time sport. It's just like cycling. It requires progression, planning, recording, repetition, frequency, consistency, intensity, energy, and time. This is not our goal. We are not trying to maximize our strength gains. All we're trying to do is just add a small layer of specific strength to improve our cycling performance. Now, do I believe that strength training prevents injuries? Yes, I do. Do I believe that it can improve performance? If it's specific, yes, I do. And do I believe that we can still put in as much riding as possible in our limited schedules and also get strength sessions in each week? I do. How? We focus on the best strength movements for cycling nearly every strength session, and we add a few auxiliary lifts for a novel stimulus and injury prevention. We keep the sessions short when need be. We prioritize the big three and aim for 1 to 2 every week. The rule of specificity. As discussed before, every exercise has a risk-reward ratio that's different per individual. The risk is how dangerous is it and likely to cause an injury, and how hard is it to learn? How much time is it going to take to get proper form? The reward obviously is how effective it is to achieve the desired results. The most common leg exercise prescribed to cyclists are the back squat, the deadlift, and the leg press. These exercises aren't bad. There's a time and place for some of you and not so much for others. And I'll discuss this and my other reservations in a future video. All right, you get what you train for. In high school and college, I was a long jumper and a high jumper. You run one leg at a time and jump as far or as high as possible off of one leg. What were my strength exercises? Front squat, back squat, leg press, power clean, all on 2 legs. Now, I'm sure those exercises helped me improve my advance. Murphy, enough. Settle. But do I believe that single leg exercises would have made greater improvements? How could they not? Yeah, I haven't been carrying that around for the last 30 years, but I digress. All right, the attributes we're looking for in strength training movements for the lower body for cycling. 1, single leg. Do we pedal with 2 legs at the same time? No, we do not. We pedal 1 leg at a time. It just makes sense that most of our strength exercises should also be single leg dominant. On top of this, we have science. When we move with 2 legs at the same time, our brain can't recruit as many fibers per leg. This is known as the bilateral deficit. When we use 1 leg or limb at a time, we can generate more force per leg. In a theoretical example, if we can leg press 200 pounds with 2 legs, we could press 110 pounds with 1. Basically, we can go deeper when we only have to focus on 1 limb at a time. We would like the exercises to have an integrated pull. Do we torque up a steep climb with no hands on the bar? Yikes. Not real well, and definitely not with much power. When we push hard on the downstroke, let's say on the right side, the bike frame will tilt right, causing us to start turning right. To keep this from happening, we actually pull the right side handlebar back, which causes the frame to start tilting to the left, keeping us straight. And this is called countersteering. We also have to deal with Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. When we push down hard on the pedals, basically the bike wants to go forward and our body wants to go backwards. If we're seated, the friction on our saddle from our weight helps keep us there, but as the force output rises, we start to offload and slide back. By pulling on the bars, we stay with our bike, essentially pulling the bike into our pedal stroke, minimizing power loss. This is exaggerated if we're also on a steep climb. This pulling on the bars involves many low force, mostly isometric contractions. And isometric just means basically with no or little movement. And those isometric contractions are through the arms and posterior core, especially the lower back. This is why your back hurts when you do a lot of heavy climbing or higher force pedaling. All the big 3 exercises involve a posterior core pull, and 2 of the 3 have the arm posterior core integration. The angle of pull is much lower with the front carry hold and the high rack weight holds than the angle of pull on the handlebars, but this works great to keep the forces at the spine relatively low and the forces at the legs high, which is the specific objective here. We can look at specific angle of pull upper body core exercises for cycling in a future video. And the third attribute, we would like to push from 0. Do we pedal with our quads preloaded and fully engaged as we come across the top of the pedal stroke? We do not. This one you can't really see, you can only feel. Yes, lots of muscles are used throughout the entire pedal stroke, and none of them are probably ever 100% off. But keeping it simple for this, most of our power comes from the downstroke, and most of that power comes from our quads, so let's focus on this. In our bike squat, which does not involve a push from 0, as we descend, our quads are eccentrically contracting, meaning they are engaged, and they are lengthening. If we come to the bottom and pause, that's an isometric contraction. It means they're still contracting but not moving. And then as we rise back up, the quads are contracting and shortening. And this is what happens during the push phase of pedaling. You can look at the descent phase. The eccentric contraction is preloading the quads. This allows greater connection and force production on the way back up during the concentric phase. This is very important in most aspects of human movement that involve gravity and a change of direction of an object or yourself. There is no eccentric contraction in the pedaling motion. The only exception if you need to brake while riding a fixed gear bike. And of course, in a non-pedaling scenario, taking a hit from a mountain bike huck to flat. Similar to the down phase of a split squat. When our foot comes across the top of the pedal stroke, there is little or no force production in the quads in regards to the beginning of the push down. We have to conjure it up from nothing. This witchcraft is something we should practice in our strength movements. We can't eliminate the eccentric phases in the weight room because, gravity never has an off day. But we can shut off the muscle at the start of the cycling specific push phase by offloading pressure on the driving leg by using a step or a box. All right, let's get into the big 3 leg exercises with more specifics in terms of technique and some setup tips. All right, step up technique. We want a solid hip hinge, a forward lean of the torso, keeping our chest up and keeping our lower back flat or a slight inward curve. We want to make sure that we offload the top leg and we put all our weight down on the bottom foot. In this position, make sure the top knee is at the toes but not in front of the toes. When driving up, make sure the knee tracks over the center of the foot and you do not assist the up motion with the lower foot. The step up does include all 3 attributes. It is single leg dominant. It involves that pull integration and it starts from 0. Modifications, if you have knee pain, you can use a slightly lower box. Also recheck your form. When in doubt, stick your butt out. If your knee is fine and you have low back issues, you can use a tall vertical spine by increasing your foot stagger, basically taking your top foot and moving it further forward on the box. This may increase pressure on your knee, but if it doesn't bother it, it still makes this a fairly effective exercise for at the very least pushing on the pedals, but it does, however, take out the pulling attribute. As far as box heights, as a general rule, if you're under 5 feet 9 inches, you want to use a 12-inch box. This is fairly common in most weight rooms. If you're above 5'9", a 14-inch box. These aren't as common. You can build boxes to suit. In this case, I used an 18-inch box for myself with a 4-inch riser at the bottom to make myself a 14-inch box. All right, single leg sit squat technique, very similar to the step up. We want a strong hip hinge and a forward lean of the spine in the down position, keeping that chest up and keeping the back flat, or a little arch in the lower back. We want to keep the knee tracking over the center of the foot. We want to make sure we put all our weight down. We fully sit on the box before pushing up. For this one, we're going to use a high rack position with the weight, keeping the weight close to the chest. Single leg sit squat has 2.5 of the 3 attributes. Obviously, it's single leg dominant. And also, if you fully sit down, has a 0 start position. And it has a posterior core pull. It just doesn't include the pulling of the arms. As far as box heights, this one is tricky. Balance is really hard. This is the most technically challenging of the 3 leg exercises. So if you're under 5'9", either a 14 or an 18-inch box. If you're over 5'9", either an 18 or a 20-inch box. And once again, you can see here I've made some modifications with what was available in the gym for different people's abilities, especially with balance and their strength and their leg length. All right, bike squat, same story as the other 2. We want a strong hip hinge, a forward lean of the torso, keeping the chest up, and that flat lower back. Our foot stance should be a slight stagger. The back foot heel should be off the ground, and the back foot is for balance only. Try to minimize its use on the up motion. The forward driving knee and foot can approach the front of the toes, but not go over, and it should track straight over the foot. As far as depth, we want to recreate the pedal stroke about a 90-degree equal hip and knee hinge. However, your range may be limited depending on your hip low back mobility. If your hips start to tuck under and your low back starts to round out, stop your descent just before this point. Use a video or a mirror to assess and work on mobility in this area to get to that pedal stroke position if you can't already. What are some downsides of the big three exercises? Well, because they are single leg dominant, they take longer. It's going to take more time to get through one leg at a time than it is to do two together, obviously. Another downside is the direction of force for these big three exercises is the opposite of pedaling. On all three of these, our foot stays stationary and our hips move away from our foot. Obviously, when we're pedaling, our hips stay relatively stationary and our foot moves away from our hips. This is very minor and it will not reduce the effectiveness of the exercises. Third downside, a single leg dominant exercise does require increased balance, stabilization, and coordination. If you have really strong legs already, and depending on your abilities in these areas, this may at first limit the amount of weight you can use to effectively and safely complete the movements with proper form. Along these lines, grip strength may also be a limiter. In this case, you may not be able to tax the legs enough simply because you can't hold on to enough weight. In this scenario, I would see it more important to address your balance, stabilization, coordination, and grip strength first before really trying to load up the legs. But if you must, you can always perform the step up and the bike squat in a rack with a barbell on your back and a spotter. Just remember to get the bike specific range first, then load up. Of the big three, the single leg squat is the most difficult and requires very little weight. For a lot of you, body weight will be plenty challenging initially. Next would be the bike squat, and then the step up is the easiest in terms of the amount of weight you can use. A possible workaround if you have really strong legs is to implement one of the high force ability two-legged movements, back squat, leg press, or deadlift. Do that first to pre-fatigue the legs before moving on to any or all of the big three single leg exercises. Another downside is that two of these require somewhat size specific boxes. Most gyms should have a variety of boxes where you can make something that are close to the height that you need. If you're doing this at home, you can always build your own box and spec it specifically to your leg length. All you need to do is take a picture from the side on your bike when your foot is at the top of the pedal stroke, and then figure out how high a box you need to get that similar position. Just general programming, what we're talking about here is for just an average strength building session, we're looking for 6 to 9 sets of a lower body movement for cycling. You can use any one or all of the big three exercises. You can include one auxiliary leg movement to provide a novel stimulus. It doesn't have to be cycling specific or for injury prevention. And then if you have some time, you can add some cycling specific upper body or core. If you don't have that kind of time for the upper body and core, remember these exercises include your upper body and core, so you're still getting some of that in there. In summary, the upsides of these big three far outweigh the downsides. They build balance, stability, strength, and the general movements are just more common in life situations. Even if you're picking up a couch, your feet are generally offset. You're putting more weight or force through one leg, and then once you get the couch up, you're probably hiking it up or down stairs. The farmer carry hold, holding the weights at the side, that is a fantastic full body exercise in itself. It's good for rotator cuff stability, core stability, strength endurance. It's considered a total body lift, so you're getting a bonus with that. As we discussed earlier, doing single leg versus two legs at the same time circumvents the bilateral deficit. Basically, we're going to be able to recruit, train, and fatigue more fibers per repetition. And because we do have to hang on to the weights with our hands, and we're also doing things on one leg requiring that stability and balance, generally speaking, the loads are lower. And this is especially on the spine, and it reduces the chance of acute injury. And lastly, if I haven't proven it by now, these big three exercises are very cycling specific movements. They're single leg dominant, they involve an arm and or post core pull integration, and 2 to 3 exercises have a push phase starting from little or no pre-muscle activation of the major drivers of the pedal stroke. So I hope you find these big three leg exercises for cycling effective. Work on them, use them often. And if you have any comments or questions, include them below. Thanks for watching.